Welcome to the Blessors of Israel podcast. I'm Matthew Dodd, Executive Director of Blessors of Israel. Today, I am honored to have with me Jonathan Hessen. He's the CEO and host of TV7 Israel. Jonathan is a senior fellow with the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security and also a senior advisor for a major organization in Washington, D.C. as well. He specializes in geostrategy and security issues related to the Middle East and Europe. Again, Jonathan, it is a blessing to have you with us today. And, since February 28th, when there was a joint strike, the United States and Israel against Iran, so much has transpired. Now we're into our fourth week. And so I wanted to have you give us a clear snapshot of the current military balance. What have the U.S. combined with Israel, their strikes achieved? So far as in terms of degrading Iran's nuclear program, missile capabilities, leadership structure, and where does Iran still retain offensive capacity?
Well, thank you for having me, Matthew. It's been, quite a busy period, to say it mildly. But with God's grace, we had the opportunity to really see reality shift right in front of our eyes. The military, U.S. Central Command, as well as in close conjunction with the Israel Defense Forces, are really on plan, as was also stated by Brad Cooper, the Admiral Brad Cooper, who is the commander of CENTCOM, and on certain instances, even ahead of plan. So there is really a successful methodological type of process of degrading Iran's military capabilities, be it its ballistic missile capabilities, its ability to launch ballistic missiles, which there were about 82 to 90% of all launchers have already been eliminated, and there are different types. So there's the medium range launchers, which can reach Israel. There's the short range launchers that can reach the Gulf countries in the region. So there are different aspects to that. I do expect in the next week or two to see a lot less being launched towards Israel, since many of those, after being shot, are located and destroyed by the air forces of both Israel and the United States, working in synergy on that. Alongside that, there are the unmanned aerial vehicles, or the drones, one-way attack drones, they call them, that have been really destroying much civilian infrastructure throughout the region, have unfortunately also claimed the lives of civilians in the region, and also caused some casualties among service members in different instances. Thankfully, nothing severe, but nonetheless, the situation continues to be as such that Iran is able to launch a couple of those drones on a daily basis, not at the levels or numbers that we expected initially. And that is very important to emphasize. So going to your question and really touching it on the various aspects to what has been achieved, the United States and Israel have launched together the Operation Epic Fury, as it's called in the United States, or Operation Roaring Lion, as it's called here in Israel, on February the 28th. On that specific day, we saw roughly between 90 to 110 ballistic missiles launched at multiple targets across the region. Now we have dwindled down to roughly 10, right? So we're at 10% of that, and sometimes they don't even launch 10 during an entire day, but rather just 2 or 3. So they are really finding it challenging to break through the various defenses, both on the offensive aspect and defensive aspect, that the United States and Israel have been operating together in order to achieve the various objectives in the field, and really degrade those capabilities that the Islamic Revolutionary Guards used to have. Now, I'll point out that it's quite interesting, since the way the United States Central Command operates, it is the leading force, so to speak. It is the command and control. Israel is playing a secondary role, to the various activities, albeit at almost every case doing a lot more from a degrading various targets from various installations, other aspects. So the U.S. Air Force is really working Israel as a sort of armia of its own various forces. So this is the closest level of operational cooperation that I've seen ever between the IDF and any military, let alone the United States. So we have really reached a certain level that not for no reason, the various documents and statements coming out of Washington State, Israel is the model ally that we would like to see in all of our allies. Now, there's still a lot of the infrastructure that hasn't been yet fully degraded. The United States is working on the more southern parts of Iran, going deeper and deeper into the eastern parts from the southern half, if you cut it in two, so to speak. And then Israel works the northern part, where it really is focusing also on the capital, Tehran, on Isfahan, on other locations. And that is how they can operate in such synergy, interoperability in certain aspects, but the United States is not imposing U.S. doctrine on the IDF. That's where the disparity stays. But it allows it to have its own zones to deal with, and that is how we see that there's a lot more efficiency, recognizing what U.S. Central Command is strong in and can assist the IDF in doing and assisting it in its weaknesses, and then vice versa, where the IDF is more proficient and this Central Command is less so. They really accommodate one another, and that is really bringing the military objectives to a whole new level. Just to put things in perspective, we're now in the fourth week, and 4 weeks in, more ordnance have been dropped on multiple targets than any other aerial campaign since World War II. The significant degradation of or elimination of various targets, be it military targets or even of local police or of various regime oppression apparatus that have just a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, triggered the murder by this regime of 32,000 plus Iranian citizens. So you're seeing a lot of that taking place right now. Just to compare it, to the first days operation, the shock and awe that was in the first days of the Iraq War. The United States dropped double the amount of ordnance this time around compared to that, right? So it's a lot of firepower. It's a lot of tactical successes. And I keep focusing on the tactical aspect. We don't know yet how to translate that into the strategic success. But again, we are merely in the fourth week. Just a couple of days ago, we marked March 24th. It was 27 years since the U.S.-led campaign in Kosovo against the Milosevic government in former Yugoslavia. That happened from 24th of March up to June 10th, right? 78 days. We're not even close to the half point in that context. And at the end of that campaign, which was purely an aerial campaign with some special operation components, there was overlap of we call it Title 10 versus Title 50, things that are conducted in the overt versus the low signature type of special operations activities happening on the ground. But right now, what we're seeing is so much more significant, so much more robust. Yes, it's a bigger country. Yes, its topography is very mountainous. And there are challenges that both Israel and the United States militaries are adapting to. But all of that is beside the point that, again, the operations are on plan or even ahead of plan, and the United States, Trump administration, President Trump himself, have the leverage to start operating also on the diplomatic course, start operating on other aspects of additional, sanctions and so on and so forth. So it's really a whole of government approach, establishing a global coalition to suppress this regime to its knees and then force it to accept defeat. We are heading in that way. Can we 100% be certain that this is where we're heading to? That is not something anyone can guarantee, but
Exactly.
based on various case studies from the past, we are heading in that direction, and we are seeing both Israel and, by the way, also the United States establishing parameters, a certain framework that would lay the foundation for the Iranian people to rise and take over their own countries. And just a couple of days ago, we heard the commander of Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper, coming out and stating publicly on Iran International, which is an opposition media channel, that they don't want to see the Iranian public flooding the streets. Not yet, right? There's going to be a signal. It's going to be very clear to the people at home in Iran, and that is the moment they expect everybody to go out and do their part, which I'm sure plenty was prepared ahead of time. So those are things that need to be taken into account. We're hearing a lot of rhetoric coming out as if the United States and Israel are losing this war. I heard even Christiane Amanpour from CNN coming out and stating that Iran was somehow in the driver's seat. Well, maybe
Hmm.
in a car that doesn't have an engine and wheels and such, it may be in the driver's seat, but that's not the case here. What we're seeing is the United States and Israel are dictating to radical military organizations that were under the impression that their demonic type of overlords grant them victory over everyone and that they're superior to everyone. And therefore, they are in a position to outwit both the United States and Israel and the whole world and bring America to its knees. And now they are required to come to terms with the fact that that's not the case. That's quite the psychological challenge for such a group of people to come to terms with anything that does not conform with the indoctrination that they have been experiencing for more than, well, for 47 years in most cases, right? The leadership itself was indoctrinated by those extreme ideologies prior to that. So this is something that we do need to take into account. And with God's grace, I mean, pray for the service members. We're really working day and night to bring about the desired outcome with very clear objectives, which is vital to achieving any victory.
So, based on just your assessment of what's been taking place, are there any surprises in regards to Iran and their response?
I actually wouldn't say so. We knew ahead of time that they are focusing on a strategy called A2AD, which is anti-access area denial. This type of strategy is actually doctrine that is utilized both by Russia in Ukraine, and it is a Chinese devised type of strategy. Uh, this is the first time that the United States really gets to directly challenge this strategy with its own counter strategy type of components, with the tactics derived of operational necessities, with the various contingencies that have been worked on for decades. I'm talking about, there were some reports, and many people have been speaking about the fact that, that the United States was not ready or expecting the Strait of Hormuz to shut down Well,
I'm glad you brought that up.
the United States has been working on this and practicing for that specific scenario well since the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, constantly updating that based on the various tools at the disposal of the adversary, namely the Islamic Republic of Iran, and not just them, other adversaries as well, right? So, looking at there is a very significant disparity between reality on the ground and what's actually being reported and spoken about by legacy media or all kind of podcasters. And I spoke with a good friend of mine, Colonel John Spencer, who is heading the urban warfare program at West Point. And I told him, you know, the number of self-proclaimed military experts that sprout out just like mushrooms every time there is a conflict, it's just astounding to me. Same with with the Houthis in Yemen. When that crisis took place, um, suddenly you had a lot of experts. Just a couple of months before that, and we used to cover that at TV7 and elsewhere for years before that. And we had a hard time finding anyone who could even understand what the Houthis are and what's the difference between them and the mother organization Ansar Allah and the various tribes and the construct and the nuances and so on and so forth. So I do caution people listening to the various so-called experts, quote unquote. The fact that somebody served in the military doesn't mean that he necessarily knows what he's talking about. Um, there are very few military officers that actually deal with the strategic versus the tactical. And therefore, when you discuss strategy, the number of strategists, there is a disparity again between the strategist community globally, which can be counted on, a couple of hundred max, versus those calling themselves strategists and not really knowing what's the difference between strategy and tactics. So there are a lot of aspects there that need to be taken into account. I caution people to listen to uh, individuals who actually know what they're talking about and do not try and manipulate narratives to the advantage of their donors or supporters or their own ideological interests, which have nothing to do with the impact and does not take into consideration the true impact it has on actual people living in the Gulf, in Israel, in the United States, ultimately also, right? So these type of picking the right individuals to listen to when it comes to expertise is very, very, very important.
I'm glad you brought up this whole idea of the experts because last week we had the resignation of Joe Kent. And one of the comments that he made is that Israel was basically dragging President Trump, into this war with Iran. And I want to speak to that because I think it's created a lot of confusion, a lot of concern. And yet, when you really press into the details, it's very clear that Trump is not going to be dragged anywhere. But I'd like to have you address it from your perspective and with the relationships that you also have both in Israel and in D.C.
Well, Joe Kent was a problematic figure prior to the administration. He's an isolationist at heart. He does not want to see the United States involved in anything to do with actual foreign policy. And he's from a group of people who have become increasingly anti-Israeli over the course of the past several months, and even more than that, such
Back
as
to the 12-day war.
right. Well, even
Yes.
before that, we saw
But you saw it really
that.
come out then.
Right. It didn't come out in the same way that we're seeing it today. Unfortunately, really, this is something evil that is currently happening, where for a long time we knew that Qatar and other actors were really investing heavily in trying to set a wedge between the United States of America and the State of Israel. And they've been operating on this obsessively with billions of dollars really focused on that, understanding full well, by the way, China also and Russia also. Why? Because they understand what we're seeing today. Israel is a model ally to the United States when trials and tribulations occur. So they want to establish that wedge in order to ensure that if the United States needs to deal with an Iran going nuclear, it won't have an Israel to assist it. It won't have an Israel to go and provide it with the intelligence and the capabilities that Israel has managed to secure here. It's doing the same in Europe. Much of those efforts to establish wedges between the United States and European allies is going both ways, by the way. It's just not just influencing the United States or the policy of the United States, but also European actors who are saying for the first time, you know what? No, this is not our war. You deal with it, right? And just, it's unfathomable to really look at the current state of play and to even consider that Britain would not be a part of something like this. Just a couple of years ago, it would have been different completely.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of impact there. Now, you spoke about Joe Kent, who again was a special operator at some point. His wife was killed in Afghanistan. He was a real hawk when it comes to Afghanistan specifically, and he came back from what Trump also spoke about. He was devastated. He was devastated by the loss of his wife, which is understandable. He remarried since very quickly, and rebuilt his life, but he became part of this isolationist trend where America doesn't need to be part of this forever wars, right? And we're seeing that foreign influence operations have really targeted many people in the United States, saying, "Here, you have lost all those wars. You are not supposed to be part of those of what's happening in the world. Just stay in your island, right?" And this is a Russian narrative. This is a Chinese narrative, and
Completely.
it's being parroted by people who are somehow finding themselves into office. And some are libertarian and some are this and some are that, but support for the libertarian movement is 1% in the United States, and yet it received center stage in the latest administration on certain levels. Now, we had a lot of concerns about the isolationists because if the United States steps back from the world, it will no longer be the United States we know it, which we have grown up into and have learned about for so many years, since it would find itself in a position where China would take over in many locations, Russia would take over in many locations. The United States cannot be the safe haven that it is today with the prosperity that it's experiencing today unless it's involved abroad. It's as simple as that. And to secure the supply lines, to secure that the Strait of Hormuz, which is partially blocked right now, and the United States is working to open, will never be blocked by an adversary because it just decides to do so. Because your gas pumps have just gone up $1, $2, right?
At home right here, at least $1.
At
Yep.
least $1.
In
This
just
could
4
go
weeks.
up. This could go up to $3, $4, $5 extra, unless the United States is involved. So there's direct impact. And that is something that needs to be taken into account. Now, bringing all that into the specifics of what this Kent individual has stated, he immediately said, "Oh, here Israel is dragging us into yet another war." What he did not say was, "I'm currently under investigation by the FBI for leaking information that may have had implications on U.S. foreign policy
Just a
and
small
on decision
detail that was
making."
conveniently left out.
That was completely left out, right? So again, moving out, he needs to capitalize on, him going and becoming a civilian again. So this is what he's jumping into. This crowd where he can be as controversial as possible, get as many as clicks as possible, draw in so many interviews, and make some money out of it. So
Exactly
it's
right.
really a selfish individual who does not care about America. With all due respect, he cares about himself. And that is clear as day. And I've spoken to people in the administration, and they said, well, the writing was on the wall. Everybody knew he would snap at some point. So, thankfully, it was not worse than what we experienced in recent days. I think that this individual will just, he's enjoying his 2 minutes of fame, and he'll find himself outside of any future administration because nobody will want to hire him.
What are we to make of these different actors? Number one, I want to talk about Saudi Arabia, Qatar. We're hearing reports that on the one hand, they want this war to end, but on the other hand, they're saying to President Trump, complete it, press it. We have a moment to capitalize on. What's behind that? Because I'm hearing commentators here in the United States saying, well, really what's driving it is that they want the higher oil prices. So what's your take on this?
Right. I'm not sure that. So there is a difference between Kuwait, which is really seeing the current situation as an existential threat to itself, and has been really hit hard by everything that's currently taking place. Next to it, you have countries like Qatar, which is the biggest loser, quite frankly, in the current composition of regional actors, and particularly the so-called GCC countries, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, since all of its energy products have been uh, put on hold, and it already had to declare force majeure when it comes to its energy exports, and that is quite significant. Um, Also, its energy infrastructure has been degraded by roughly 17%, which is going to impact it for a long time because it needs to rebuild. And then you have the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Bahrainis who have been subject to attacks. The Emiratis have been subject to most attacks. They've been hit hard, but they have been very successful in intercepting and really giving the Iranians a fight defensively. They have not gone on the offensive, leaving that to both Israel and the United States to do. That is no longer the case when it comes to the Saudis. The Saudis said the next time we're attacked, we're going on the offensive. The Iranians have not launched an attack since, and I'm not sure whether the Saudis really follow through on this or not. But there is a chance it could happen. They have a lot of F-15s, a fleet of almost 300 F-15Es, which are very capable aircraft, multi-role aircraft, and flying those back and forth with a relatively short time on target could give the United States and Israel the advantage in certain areas if you just let them operate there. But all in all, from an energy export type of equation, uh, both the Emiratis and the Saudis have a east to west pipeline. So that has been working unhindered, and we can say roughly 1/3 of the volume that usually is exported is still getting out. So 1/3 is it's not great, but it's not terrible. Now, the 2/3 is something that they're working on, and obviously those who are getting the brunt of this situation happen to be also China and Japan and South Korea. So we're seeing them trying to find a resolution to this, and then trying to get the oil out as quickly as possible, and the LNG, the liquid gas, and other aspects or other energy products that they want to see getting out of there. But within all of that, and coming back to your question, there are certain concerns about a day after in the Gulf countries, the Arab countries. Since what happens if the regime falls, usually, historically speaking, does indicate a period of chaos, where there are splinter cells, terror cells, some of which still have ballistic missiles in their possession. It's a big country, more than 90 million people. And to have chaos in such a country without a responsible actor taking the reins of power and really controlling what's happening, I mean, that's the best case scenario, right? But having chaos is highly likely, at least for a period. And so they were very hesitant to start on the onset saying, okay, the objective that the United States and Israel are pursuing, it may be regime change from Israel's perspective, since they clearly see that the Ayatollah regime, which is an ardent zealot following of the 12 Shia Islam that believes that in order for the El Mahdi, the 12th Mahdi, to come out and reveal himself, namely their Messiah, Israel needs to be destroyed and the West needs to crumble. Right? So, for anyone who understands the rationale uh, or the danger behind the rationale that they're trying to pursue, says, look, they're just not a trustworthy actor, because they're going to pursue tools in order to bring about what they openly say: death to America, death to Israel. For some reason, everybody omits the death to England part, but that's also in that equation. And then death to all non-believers, namely of the 12th Shia Islam sect, right? So those people are looking to bring about the downfall of the West and for their Messiah to return. Now, obviously, that is something that we'll do everything in our power to frustrate, but that calculus is in mind for regime change, right? Those people can't remain there, because if they can achieve nuclear weapon capabilities, and they've been already working on three-stage ballistic missile technology that could reach continental United States. So if you have those two components in there with a regime willing to use it in the event that it finds itself with its back against the wall, such as what it currently finds itself in, that would mean millions of American lives, and millions of Israeli lives, and millions of lives around Europe, and so on and so forth. That is not something that is not um, in the back minds of every leader, both in the United States, including President Trump, who's been very open about it, as well as Israel. They understand the danger that Iran poses to Western civilization, to the Christian civilization at that, right? Judeo-Christians. So that is one point that needs to be taken into account. Another point that needs to be taken into account is, in the event that this regime then crumbles and falls, you suddenly have all kind of religious fanatics of 12 Shia Islam running around, splinter cells, forming terrorist organizations, and targeting who? The Sunni Arab countries in the region. It impacts their oil exports. It impacts their security, the sense and perception of security of cities like Doha and Abu Dhabi that have defined themselves as safe havens and the safest places in the whole world. That is an image that they will no longer be able to sustain unless certain scenarios take place. So there was a lot of caution there. Now,
Very good.
the main point that I think that needs to be put out there is there are contingencies for the day after. What is applicable and what is not, I'm not sure. That is something that still There are risk assessments constantly taking place. There are various calculations that are constantly taking place. Uh, Time will tell how those things evolve over time. But with God's grace, what is cannot be is the bottom line. What will be is in God's hands.
So you brought up China, and I'd
Yes.
like to talk about China, Russia, and Turkey and with the remaining time that we have. Interesting to see the different dynamics and their involvement, their engagement with this. And I think it'd be good for us to understand why they're doing what they're doing right now, or why they're not doing what some would perceive they should be doing right now. What are your thoughts?
Sorry about that. That was an update before a rocket alert siren. So we get
Do we need
it
to
into all of our systems, and
do
then
we need to stop right now, or
so
are you good?
if it happens, no, if the alarms start running, I'll
Okay,
have to
sure, fair
leave.
enough.
So just to keep that in mind, we'll have to go to the bomb shelter. Maybe I'll be able to take you with me there, but we'll see how that works. Um, but when it comes to okay, Russia, China, and Russia have their own strategic autonomy, right? Each one has its own calculation, and it's too early to tell how this is going to impact their calculus going forward. When it comes to Turkey, I think it's in a position where it can find itself in a very positive position. Um, and capitalize on various strategic aspects to the developments currently at play. But Turkey is very uncomfortable when it's not its own strategic decision making. It needs to have that, to be in the driver's seat, so to speak, or it gets anxiety. And a country of, again, 90 million, almost 100 million, with anxiety is never good. And we saw that Iran it launched two ballistic missiles towards Incirlik, which is an American base in southern Turkey. Those two ballistic missiles were intercepted by the first one by Spain, the second one by the United States as part of the NATO contingent in that country. They are in a position where they don't really have air defenses. So they cannot sustain an attack on themselves. They can play the low signature type of proxy wars. They're very comfortable in that. They're accusing Israel of, destabilizing the region and threatening all chaos and so on and so forth. And they're really upset with Israel. I mean, and more so up until the war, the campaign right now. Turkey was in a position where it felt really comfortable with the Trump administration. The Trump administration was very much hugging Turkey in every sense possible. It practically gave it Syria, right? It helped it in many aspects and has always been very vocal about its appreciation of Turkey and so on and so forth. But when it came down to money, uh, and not fiscal, but the money time type of scenario, it suddenly wasn't in the loop. Suddenly, Washington was coordinating with Jerusalem about something that is going to impact Turkey as a whole and its grand strategy on a global scale. Now, that really caught it off guard. And I wasn't happy about that. And we're seeing the ripple effects of that taking place right now, where they're asking themselves, okay, where are we? Are we really comfortable in our skins with regard to what's developing right now? So their rhetoric is very anti-Israel, and I expect it to fester further as time progresses. Um, their military is not strong enough to really pose a challenge to Israel. from a military perspective. But there is an overlap of strategic interest here between Turkey and Israel, where neither country wants war, right? And I believe that both countries can benefit economically from each other a lot more than starting to look at confronting each other. Now, Turkey does have expansionist aspirations, and also influence-wise, and also the so-called neo-Ottoman type of aspiration to really matter. It comes about, this culture that has been part of an empire, and the people really aspire to maintain that imperial type of experience in their culture, and as such, that they are constantly looking at deepening. Anywhere you go in Africa, you'll see Turkey. Anywhere. They are playing at the same level as the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians up until recently, right? That is not something that needs to be taken lightly. They are having bases in all continents. They are part of to NATO, and they're active in support of Ukraine against Russia. So it's a multifaceted type of strategy that needs to be taken into account. I won't go into the smaller
Sure.
resolutions because we'll be here until, a week from today. But within that context, I will point out that prior to the Trump administration taking office, there was a true, Turkey found itself in a true juncture where it was considering jumping boat and actually aligning itself with China at the expense of the West. And it seems like the United States, under the Trump's presidency, identified that and is giving it a bear hug to kind of say, calm down. You're part of the West. You're okay. We have interest in you. You're absolutely reliant on the European economy and to a certain degree on the American economy. So how about you don't make any rash decisions, and out of this imperialist type of perspective start to conduct a strategic autonomy type of approach that is counterproductive to your own interests. So that was the American approach, and it was quite evident. I don't think in Ankara they fully appreciate that still, but they play ball, and they went with it again, which ultimately triggered now that backlash or that shock of, wait, we thought that we were above Israel in the type of partners level with the United States, which clearly isn't the case, right? Now, China identifies this and is looking to deepen its footprint, and it will start courting Turkey a lot more aggressively in the days and months ahead, which is to be expected, and they will see all kind of methods to really soar that up. We see that also happening in Pakistan and in Egypt and in North Africa, but Africa at large, but also North Africa in particular, and then also in the Arabian Gulf. China is very heavily reliant on energy products coming out of the Straits of Hormuz. So it suddenly realizes, okay, we need some type of strategic independence or energy independence from the strategic Strait of Hormuz. So they divert a lot of their resources right now to expand the connectivity between China and Russia. Now, that's not necessarily something we would like to see, um, because we'd like Russia to have its own strategic autonomy and to decouple between Russia and China. But Beijing also understands this and is really making that effort. It has some domestic issues which are not completely understood these days. Just a couple of weeks ago, China had to fire and actually remove many of its generals and top defense officials. Some claimed this had to do with infiltration from Western actors. But nobody really understands what happened there. It could have been an attempted coup, for all we know, right? But what we do know for certain is that the economic situation in China is not as good as it used to be, and this will undoubtedly have some indirect implications on the manner in which it conducts its foreign policy, also towards the United States, also towards Europe, which is banking on very heavily, and also towards Africa and the rest of Asia, including in the vicinity of Israel, the Middle East. I will point out that when October 7th happened, and I mentioned this on the show with you prior to this, Matthew, the Chinese blocked all type of communications, official communications with the state of Israel. They were certain that Israel was done for and that it was on the last breath, so to speak. And within 1 year, it suddenly realized, okay, this is changing. This is not the same situation. And Israel is still stronger than everybody claimed. So they made that phone call between their foreign secretary, Wang Yi, and Israel's, at the time, foreign minister, today's defense minister, Israel Katz. And since then, the only, I mean, the highest level of Israeli official to visit China was at the level of Deputy Director General of the Foreign Ministry. That's like the highest level that visit. So it's um, very low at this point of bilateral relations between Beijing and Jerusalem, which may have implications of its own. But China understands that Israel is here to stay, and it's going to fight, and it's resilient, and the people of Israel are resilient, and it also understands that this unique relationship between the state of Israel and the United States is truly unshakable. Just to put things into context, in Israel, we have roughly 700,000 Americans living. That is more than the last two smallest states in the United States of America. That's a lot of Americans, right? So that type of intercultural exchange, where there is a robust exchange, not just Jews, but also Christians, that have a very strong root here. I mean, you see here multiple denominations, obviously, but the congregation here is comparative to Israel's size, growing significantly, and that is something to take into account. So there are a lot of angles here that need to be taken into account. Russia is a different story. Russia is currently embroiled in the war in Ukraine. There are a lot of considerations that Russia needs to take into account. It is concerned, obviously, by the fall of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which, if the regime does fall, this would be the second historically Soviet type of regime to fall in less than 3 years. Which, from a perspective of Swolensky Square, which is where the Russian Foreign Ministry is in Moscow, and the Kremlin, that would be a quite a tough defeat from Russia's foreign policy objectives, which in America, for some reason, they always think Russians are, this master strategists with their pawns and this and that. They don't really have a strategy, and it's quite apparent. And they are very reactive, or reactionary rather, to various developments on the global stage these days, which do indicate that its superpower status, it's not there anymore. It's not where it used to be. They will work together, all those countries which you mentioned, in order to bring
Agreed.
about the downfall of the United States, though. And that's their one thing that they have in common. Their hatred for America, their hatred for the West, and as an extension to that, their hatred for Israel. Not because they hate Israel, and when they attacked Israel effectively, the Chinese utilized TikTok in the United States to further anti-Israel sentiments, since October 7th very robustly. And when Israel responded to them by saying, do you mind stopping that? And obviously there were various exchanges of that. They played, dumb, and they didn't want to acknowledge that, and they were trying to outmaneuver Israel, not very successfully. And
So,
America was construed as an attempt by China to establish a wedge. In Washington, they understood that there is direct impact. The Chinese approach is basically as such that it's trying to cause Israel to look bad because that reflects on America, not because of Israel, because of America. And by extension, that was China's approach, that was Iran's approach, that was uh, Russia's approach. Many of those anti-American actors were attacking Israel because it reflects bad on America, and they wanted that to sink into American society and then translate that again into establishing a wedge between Washington and Jerusalem, which unfortunately, according to polls, they've been quite successful.
yeah, they have. Well, Jonathan, I just really appreciate your time today. Wrapping things up, how can our partners, how can our viewers follow you, learn more about TV7 and the work that you're doing?
Well, we in the United States, we have a robust presence on social media naturally through YouTube or our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. Next to that, we also are we broadcast once a week on NRV TV, and there are a few other affiliations. I'm not sure at what hours and such, so look it up. But TV7 Israel, um, every weekday. Happy to have everyone watching.
Absolutely. Must watch, great resource. When it comes to trusted voices, I believe yours and the group that you bring on definitely trusted in terms of getting a real understanding of what's going on with Israel and the Middle East. And I want to also just thank those who've been watching right now. We pray that you have found this time with Jonathan informative. We want to encourage you to learn more about Blessors of Israel. You can do so by going to our homepage at www.blessors.org. That's blessors with an ors.org. There you'll learn information in regards to our vision and our mission. Make sure, by the way, you also visit our newsroom. There at our newsroom, you'll see curated news concerning Israel and the Middle East, along with original articles from a biblical perspective. If you haven't done so already, make sure you like this podcast, subscribe to this channel, tell your family, your friends, people you go to church with, so that they can be also informed about the importance of standing with Israel in the latter days. You can follow us on Facebook, X, and Getter, and we appreciate your prayers and your financial partnership as we build this new and important ministry. Remember, those who bless Israel will be blessed. Shalom, shalom.